Wednesday, everybody, and welcome to our second episode of the Motor City Mad Mouse Show, promptly named after my hat, among other things. We did their first Motor City Mad Mouse show with George Eichhorn, and we're doing another one with my tranquilizer on the air, aka Bo Crouch, who is known for his work with Football Talk with Bo, and more importantly, he's my right hand man on Inside the Pigskin. Welcome to the show, Bo.
How's it going? Thanks for having me on.
Oh, you're welcome. It's always a pleasure having you on. So, why don't we let our audience find out about getting to know you? Give us some background information on yourself.
Yeah, so I mean, as far as sports are concerned, that's been football in specific has been a love of mine since I was a kid. I went on to play semi-pro and pro arena, won a national title. In and around football for a long time, retired when I was 30, and got to a spot where I wanted to return to the sport, and that's how I got into the podcasting world.
Very good. All right. Well, everybody know that the Motor City Mad Mouth show is being broadcast around the world. The audio version of the Motor City Mad Mouth show can be heard on iHeartRadio, Apple, Spotify, Google, wherever you get your podcasts. Please hit the red subscribe button on YouTube, South Florida Tribune. We're striving for more subscribers. Please also comment, like, and share the broadcast. Want to be a guest? No problem. Participate in the chat room. One way to do it, or kindly send your topic ideas, South Florida Tribune at gmail.com. If you want to advertise cost efficiently, give me a call at 954-304-4941. We broadcast live on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube. Our website is www.southfloridatribune.com, Twitter/X at Tribune South. Bo does a very nice job helping us share some of the content. Candy Ebling is producing the show. I have a book out there called Lessons from the Microphone, Tuning into the Enduring Wisdom of Visionary Leaders. Pretty much tells you old school media versus new school media, which is available on Kindle and Amazon. All right. With that said, Bo, let's talk about your favorite sport as a child.
Yeah, I mean, definitely football. Definitely football. I grew up in the 80s, so I got to watch the Seahawks. I was here in the Seattle area. So I got to watch Steve Largent and Dave Craig and Kenny Easley and all those guys. Some of the very few that actually have their numbers in the rafters. It's not something Seattle does a lot of. And I've got to weather a lot of good and bad in Seattle sports, especially when it comes to football. I watched our 92 year where we went 2-14, obviously was still around for, our Super Bowl appearances. But as a Seattle sports fan, not just Seahawks, obviously the Mariners, we've seen them go up and down, more down than up though.
Yeah. So you said you saw Steve Largent. Who are some of the other players that you took note of?
Yeah. So, Steve Largent, I got to see Dave Craig, Kenny Easley, Brian Blades, Chris Warren, so many guys from back in that era. And then as you kind of progress through the years, guys like Ken Hamlin, Hasselbeck, all those guys through the Holmgren era. Yeah. And of course, all the current ones that, if you're, older than 10, you probably also know.
Brian Blades, as I remember, isn't he related to Benny Blades, right? The former Detroit Lion.
That I don't remember offhand. You might be right though.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. And you said Kenny Easley, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember him real well. He was a pretty good player for them, that's for sure. So, I can tell that you're Seattle born Seattle's in your blood for sure. So let's talk about your passion for football. What is it that you like so much about football? Because we certainly know that you know a lot about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those sports where it truly is a team sport. It doesn't matter how good any one player is. If you don't have the other 10 guys on the field with that person, you're not going to do much. Even if you have the best quarterback in the world, if your line isn't good, nothing's going to happen. Or, if you say you have an average quarterback and, but your receivers can't catch. I mean, everybody has to play together. For me, I was a defensive player, right? So as a corner, I rely heavily on my defensive line, right? So that's one of those guys have to be able to apply pressure, because as a corner or a safety, you can only guard for so long, right? You could be exceptionally good at what you do, but if nobody can get home, eventually they're going to get you. So it's truly that team sport. So that's probably one of the things I enjoyed the most about it.
So who's your favorite Seahawk of all time?
I mean, probably Largent, right? I mean, it's the one that I remember as a kid. It's why I wanted to be a receiver originally, and that changed at the high school level. But yeah, I mean, Steve Largent, yeah.
So you say you played the sport of football for a while. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so played in school. Obviously, went to Lake Washington High School in Kirkland, Washington. We had a horrendously bad team. We changed coaching staffs every year, and so there's not a real way to build continuity there. And then went on to play semi-pro ball. Played for the King County Jaguars and then the Renton Ravens. Won a national title with the Ravens, and then went on to play arena ball in the AIFA. And so that was Arena League. So my position changed a little bit. I was no longer a corner. I ended up being a J-back, which is kind of like a linebacker. But rules are wildly different in arena sports. So that took a little getting used to. But yeah. I mean, so I played for a long time.
So that anybody can talk about it. When you played it, it's certainly a lot easier to talk about. So tell me about the Arena Football League. Okay, I believe Arena Football League. Period. How do you like playing a sport where you have on a field for about 50 yards, and that's about it? We all know it's an entirely different game, anyways. And when it comes to breeding talent, what are you mainly looking for? Wide receivers in a certain skill position, but because defense isn't really emphasized in the Arena Football League.
Yeah, you are set up for failure as a defender in arena, because not only are they moving first, but you can't. So as a J-back, we were the rules for us were very strange. So on the offensive side of the ball, at least in our version of arena, there's different leagues of arena ball. So I mean, some of the rules are a little different league to league, but in ours, a couple of the receivers got to move before the ball was snapped. As a J-back, linebacker essentially, you had to be no deeper than 5 yards behind the defensive line, and you couldn't be outside the tackles, outside the ends, right? So, and you couldn't move until the ball was snapped. So you have receivers that are already at a full run, and you can't move until the ball is snapped. So you have to be able to cover the width of the field as fast as possible, because they still have a running back as well. So it's definitely set up for points. But for me as a defensive player, I like to hit people. So it was fun to hit people in arena sports, because it's an ice arena that has the old school AstroTurf put down, right? It's basically like a plywood platform with the old, like just standard carpet style AstroTurf. But the ice arena walls are there, but none of the glass is there. Right. So if somebody goes to the outside, or say they're going to the back of the end zone or something like that, if you hit them up top, you can blow them out into the stands. Like you can knock them into the crowd or out into the concourse. So I mean, they were really hoping their quarterbacks didn't hurt them, because if you knock them out of the stadium, they're landing on concrete.
Tell me about AstroTurf. I had to deal with that at the Pontiac Silverdome. And I'm going to tell you, here's the thing. When you cover the NFL back in the day, you had a lot of AstroTurf fields. Minneapolis was bad. Actually had to have my knee drained after being at the Metrodome, but I would always be on the field where Barry Sanders made the Silverdome his home. And let me tell you, put artificial surface on concrete. The Pontiac Silverdome was a dangerous place to play. Not only did you wreck knees, but you got a lot of concussions. So I can appreciate where you're coming from.
Well, and the Kingdome had that as well.
Right.
Kingdome was an old AstroTurf stadium. Pretty cool building, really.
I was actually in there one time. I actually kind of liked the place. And I think what I really enjoyed about the Kingdome is the noise level, that the Seahawks really did have a home field advantage, because the place was loud. That's for sure.
There is no doubt. We actually used to get penalties for being too loud back in the 80s. You'd get a unsportsmanlike conduct penalty, and it was funny because what do you think that does to a crowd? Makes you louder.
Yeah, I think the Seahawks felt bad about it, but that's why you call him the old 12th man, right?
That's right.
So let's talk about building your brand. I know I met you on Twitter and you gravitated, you helped me out, you shared a lot of our content. Then all of a sudden we became friends. I brought you on the show and you've been a fixture anyways. But your brand is Football Talk with Bo. How many shows do you do a week?
Oh man. So let's see. Like 14, 15 shows. Yeah, 14, 15 shows, something like that.
Really? How do you do it?
Yeah, I mean, like today is typically my longest day. I will be on camera. I'll be in front of the camera about 7 hours today.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, are you fortunate? Have you been able to find a sponsor that is allowing you to go ahead and be on there enough where it's hard to monetize the business here? But are you finding a way, since you're able to be on that many times, to be able to do that, to be able to stay in? That's incredible to be on that many times.
Yeah, I mean, I'm working towards it, right? So it's been a slow growth. So I've been on this path for a little over a year now, and I've taken it from being really horrible on camera, to say the least.
Right.
Fortunately, you get to do that in front of nobody. Nobody's watching your show when you start, and that's probably better because if you scroll back in the catalog, you're going to see some some choppy some choppy attempts at doing what we do. But as far as monetizing, you're constantly growing, right? Like every platform has its own rules. Like YouTube, for example, which some of the people in the comments here are obviously watching on YouTube, which is helpful. Be sure to like and subscribe. But one of the biggest things is you got to get to that 1,000 subscribers, and then there's a certain amount of watch hours that you need, and those are kind of true stats, whether you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, Instagram, whatever, right? They all kind of have those things. You can't even go live on TikTok until you have 1,000 people following you. So I mean, there's so many rules that you got to play along with. And then I've gotten to the point where I was able, I was asked to be on a Roku TV channel. So I mean, it's all trending the way that I'm trying to make it go. In conversations now of potentially taking over the pay-per-view broadcast for a local MMA circuit. So I mean, they're all things that are trending the way that you want them to go. But no, as it sits right now, I'm not making good money doing what I'm doing. But I do enjoy it a lot more than the career paths that I used to have.
Well, as long as you have a path and you know what you're doing, that's unbelievable. We'll go to George Eichhorn in the comment section. I find Bo to be a great football mind, so well schooled on NFL and college, especially. Yeah, obviously now George has moved over to the baseball show, but we did a lot of stuff with them. Will Vogel's an aspiring broadcaster. Good evening, everyone. Will, he's learning the ropes. He's young, has a tremendous amount of potential. And then back to George Eichhorn. That's amazing that you have 14 shows a week.
It
really is.
It's a lot. It's a lot. It's really a lot when you think of the prep that goes into them all.
Oh, I can imagine. Yeah, well, I mean, the thing is, like you say, you got prep, you got social media, you have so many different things that you work at that most people nowadays don't understand. When I got into business 44 years ago, I worked with, now what they call now terrestrial radio. All you had to do was make sure the content was good. You complied with FCC regulations. Yep. Now it's just a much different animal, which leads to why I wrote my book, Lessons from the Microphone, Tuning into the Enduring Wisdom of Visionary Leaders, which you can see at the top right of your screen. And like I said, it's old school media versus new school media, and it is available on Kindle and Amazon. So I admire you. You're a tremendous help on Inside the Pigskin. I think I know that everybody likes you. We have a good group there with Mel Farr, Coach Bono, and the list goes on. Travis Holmes does well. George Eichhorn was doing well. But we just try to keep things real. We try that. The purpose of that show is make sure we have a player, a coach or maybe two players that have played the game, not looking for nothing against regular podcaster per se, but I want people that have been there so it enhances the credibility of what we do. And with
Sure.
your knowledge and everything, it only bolsters it that much more. So let's talk about what's in store for Bo. We're going to break it down into 3 increments. Where do you want to be a year from now?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, a year from today, what will be heading into what it would be my second Super Bowl doing this. It would be cool to have this in a position where um, financially it's comfortable doing this full time, right?
Right.
And I feel like that's probably the ultimate goal for anybody that is doing a podcast or is on any of these is ultimately you want to get to a spot where you're being paid for your time, right? It is one thing that is very different than any other business that I've owned. I had a auto repair business, I had an HVAC company, and when you start those, any business you start doesn't generally generate money right away, right? Like you don't.
Right.
3 to 5 years is that window for a company to be successful, right? And so
Right.
generally you are operating at even or a loss for the first couple of years. I mean, that's just basic dynamics of owning a business, being a small, business owner. This particular path is very different than your traditional business because in a traditional business, even when you aren't necessarily successful, you can kind of survive on cash flow, right? Because you have a product or a service that you're offering, people, whether like HVAC, I was installing furnaces and AC and stuff like that, right? So you're
Right.
you're surviving on the cash flow of you have a product they need, and you may not be making a huge profit, but it keeps the thing rolling. When you get into podcasting, it's very interesting because you have to achieve a certain level of success before any money can even become available, right? Because they're not going to pay you because you talk about sports or sports or any of that, right? They're buying your sphere of influence, right? They're buying your
Mhm.
subscribers, your viewers, whatever you want to call them. And when you start out in this, you don't have any of those. So you have to do all of the work, right? You have to create your shows, make sure the content's good, be as smooth on camera as you can be. Try not to say 5,000 times, which, when you start out, you're probably going to do. All of those things you have to kind of start to master before you end up with the following to then finally get monetized by these different platforms.
Yeah, it's a very involved process for sure. So, all right, let's talk about where you want to be in 5 years, Bo.
I mean, in 5 years, it'd be cool to have this in a way where I could be traveling to some of these things. So, one of the shows that I do during the season, it's over now, but I do a sports bar series for Thursday Night Football. And the
Okay.
reason for that is Thursday Night Football has kind of been the worst game of the week. And as an analyst, I got to watch them all anyway, right?
Right.
So, I kind of tailored this to I can highlight local businesses. It makes it a little more fun to watch the game, and I basically end up at a different sports bar each week. In this case, we were going through Western Washington. So if you're familiar with Western Washington, we basically went from Tacoma to Bellingham was the width of the path we took, and we were selecting a different sports bar each week and interviewing the owner,
Hmm.
packing all the stuff in, and then come back for the game. Or if it was a long ways away, we would just pack it all up and you know kind of hang out in the city and then go wherever we were. But ultimately we would go back and we'd watch the game there, and it also made it a lot of fun in the way that if you watched my show and we were going to be in your town, you could come out and have a beer with us, watch the game with us, and we could talk about football during the game. So it gave me a way to watch the game in a fun way. I got to highlight local businesses, and I got to meet people that viewed the show, which is great. It was a fun way to meet people.
Well, that shows your business intelligence, anyways, because, like you said, you've been in business for a while, so you know what it's like to be an entrepreneur. Then I'm going to ask you. I know it's hard, but you have to have 3 types of goals: a 1, 5, and a 10-year plan. So
Sure.
let's just go out there and hit the 10-year plan, and tell me where you'd want to be at that point.
Yeah, I mean the 10-year plan. this would kind of probably fall in the 5-year plan also, is, making sure that I have the, have achieved all the media credentials, because that's
Right.
that's its own uphill battle as well. And but I want to be able to go to these other venues and do interviews and stuff like that. And so it would be fun to have this as a traveling thing, especially say when the NFL visits Europe. It'd be fun to go to some of those games. Go and be part of the media that is interviewing the players in and out. Also it'd be really fun to interview some of the fans over there, because
Mhm.
they're having to watch some of these games, especially when they're stateside. They're watching these games at 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
That's a prime time game for us, and that's the middle of that's middle of the night for them. So that's dedication to the sport. And it would be very cool to go over and chat with some of those people.
Well, being on the West Coast, I've got to ask you, you bring up a really good point. How do you like being on the West Coast, being a football guy? Because I was in Arizona for a while, and I have to tell you, I enjoyed the games earlier so that I had the rest of the day to myself. Do you feel the same sentiment? I moved to Florida because I wanted to be near my parents, and I was in Arizona, but I really enjoyed it there. But what about you, a West Coast guy?
Oh, it's fantastic. It's
Yeah.
fantastic. Yeah, no, because I mean, say it's one of the Europe games, right? It is uh, one of those games is 6 a.m. for me, which is awesome because I wake up at 4 a.m. every day anyway. So that one I can get up, have breakfast, whatever. Your standard 1 o'clock game, East Coast time, is 10 a.m. here, right? A 10 a.m. game is awesome. Say the Hawks have the morning game, you can meet up with friends, have some mimosas and breakfast. It's awesome. And then your latest game starts at what, 5:30. So your day is, your football day is over at 8:30, 9 o'clock, right? So it is definitely nice. I always feel bad for like the East Coast on a primetime game. They're going to bed at midnight after watching football. So I do like the West Coast time zone for watching sports. It's a little different about visiting other people's shows, because if they have a morning show, then all of a sudden I am trying to get on camera at 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock in the morning, because that is a 8 or 9 o'clock East Coast time. And so it's a little bit different if you're hitting a morning show.
All right, let's go back to the chat room. The Botkin show is chiming in.
Yep, yep.
Who's going to be the Commanders' new coach? Only one opening left.
Man, yeah, your guess is as good as mine. I don't believe it's going to be Quinn though, so it's yeah, I don't know. I'm with you there, Nick. I don't have a good answer for that. I'm not sure they know what they're doing yet.
I'm not so sure either. All right, we'll go back to the Botkin show again. As a UFC fan, I wish I lived on the West Coast.
There's no doubt. There is
Yeah,
no doubt,
well,
because it's even late here by the time they wrap up half the time. So, a lot of times the UFC is wrapping up at what, 10:30, especially if some of those rounds go the full length.
yeah.
They if you get a lot of fights that go the full distance, you're 10:30 here. And yeah, so if you're on the East Coast, what, it's 1:30 in the morning. That is that's tough on a work night if you're trying to go to if you're trying to go to a job the next morning.
We have some good participation in the chat room. So, all right, Bo, so let me ask you, what do you want everybody out there to know about Bo Crouch that we haven't talked about?
Ah,
I always ask
it,
people that question.
it's funny. I'm not real guarded. So if you ever have a question, you see me live on Twitter or any other platform, just ask. I'm pretty much an open book. I'm not, I don't really hide anything. So I guess there's nothing that I can really think of that I feel like people should know that maybe they don't. It's eh, just know that I am learning this as much as anybody else. So even when you see me, and I get a great compliment sometimes that I look very professional, with my platform. And I can tell you, it's still learning every day. So if you're just starting out and you don't feel like you're there, just keep working at it, because we were all terrible starting out.
Yeah, well, there's no doubt. You have to have patience. Rome wasn't built in a day, but you have to dedicate yourself and work your tail off and don't take anything for granted. You're building every second is what you're really doing. So, all right, Candy Ebling says, "What do you think of the new head coach in Seattle, Mike McDonald?"
Yeah, so that was one of the only two coaching candidates that I actually thought was good. So obviously Ben Johnson, I liked what they were able to do with that offense. They were top five in just about every category with that offense. So that would have been a nice fit. It sounded like he wanted way too much money. He said he wanted, every report I've read so far, he wanted more money than what Harbaugh is getting with the Chargers. And
Right.
Harbaugh, he's been to a Super Bowl. He won a national title in college.
Right.
Obviously, he's tried and true between the two divisions. So if you're telling me an unproven coach, right? Like we've seen what he's done with the offense, but we don't know what he is as a leader of men, as building a roster, things like that. So, not to say that he can't do it, we just don't know. So, the numbers that I heard were somewhere between 15 and 18 million a year. If you got a guy that's tried and true and Harbaugh getting 12 and a half,
All right.
I couldn't justify that, and it's why the rumors that came out were that teams got spooked, and rightfully so. When it comes to McDonald, they had a top five defense in almost every category, and that is something that Seattle has had a real problem with over the last 5 years. They have been a bottom five defense, and last year when you look at the offense, they were a top 10 scoring offense, and this year it dropped, but mostly because they had an immense amount of offensive line issues. Both tackles get hurt in the first game. One of their guards get hurt in their first game. Both tackles were on IR until like week 14, I think it was. So you're
Right.
not going to win a lot of games like that, especially when you're using tight ends to fill in gaps for blocking schemes. So, but all of the pieces are still on this team on the offense that was a top 10 scoring offense. So if you can get all those guys healthy, and of course it's the NFL, you never know if they're going to stay healthy, but if you can at least
Right.
enter the season healthy, you have the potential to have a top 10 offense. If you can get that defense from the bottom five, if you can get them to like a top 13, right? Like if you can get them just above the middle of the road,
Uh,
the Seahawks will be a tough out for people. The one thing with McDonald is he has a lot of pressure to be great right away. Because when you think of the last coaches for the Seahawks, you have Mike Holmgren. They get to a Super Bowl. They
right.
got to numerous playoff, appearances. You go directly from that. I just kind of bypassed the 1 year with Mora. That doesn't really count. And
Right.
then they didn't give him enough time to even find out if he was good. But so then you go into the Pete Carroll era, and I think he missed the playoffs twice, and then gets to a couple of Super Bowls. So you're going to have a ton of pressure to be great right away because the roster that you have currently has been in the playoffs. They made it there last year. So it's not like it's not like it's Washington where you have to build the entire program. You have enough players on this roster that you can be good immediately. And because of the success, especially recent success, there will be a ton of pressure to be good right away.
Yeah, amazingly enough, Jim Harbaugh, obviously, and as a Kalen DeBoer, right?
Yep.
Both now have new jobs, and yeah, amazingly enough, Michigan and Washington will be in the Big Ten next year, but they're going to do it with entirely different coaches. So, and I know, and you and I have talked about this on Inside the Pigskin, but the Michigan Washington game, to me, I guess depends on what side. I have no problem with the way it worked out. Michigan snapped a drought, both of them left a drought. So, give us some final thoughts about that Michigan Washington game, since we're Seattle and Michigan with the two
Yeah,
of
I
us
mean,
in a candid sense.
so that game, Michigan was the better team, right? Hands down. Even if Washington would have played a perfect game, it would have been a tall order. That Michigan team, especially the starting lineup, had a lot of NFL caliber guys. You're in this year's draft, you're going to see a lot of guys from that Michigan team end up in the league. At the same time, the Michigan running game was so good that you saw the Huskies change some of their game strategy, and they became so overly aggressive on defense. It's why some of those big plays happened in that first quarter, right? Because they were no longer in the position. They weren't playing smart football. They were trying to be hyper aggressive to shut things down. It opened gaps behind them. And you saw both of those first two scores happened right away, right? Like it was almost immediate, because all of a sudden your secondary was just out of position the whole time. So they started to settle down. Second and third quarters were, a battle back and forth, right? They traded points back and forth. You started to think, okay, they can kind of climb back into this thing. And then the fourth quarter came and they were trying to do a little bit too much, and which rightfully so, right? You're running out of time. You do have to try and stretch the field a little bit. And they made some mistakes. So if you were going to beat Michigan this year, you had to be absolutely perfect. When you saw Alabama get close, that was a game where they were playing close to a perfect game. Like they were playing as good as Alabama could have played. And so, I mean, it's, sometimes it's just not your day. And we watched that in the NFL this last weekend.
Very good. Well, you have another person out here who says, good evening, Dave Bradley. Good to see you again. He's one of my colleagues over at NGBN TV, and we talk about the Roku and that platform, which obviously will consist of Apple TV, Amazon Fire mobile devices, and it's going to reach 85% of the homes in the United States and Canada with 4.1 billion devices. And Dave's a really good guy. He's really big on soccer, and I'm glad that he was able to chime in tonight. Well, Bo, I can't tell you how much fun it's been to have you on the Motor City Mad Mouse show. I certainly enjoy having you alongside of me on Inside the Pigskin. And now this was an opportunity for our audience to get to know you on a much different level. So I want to thank you very much for joining us. Well, everybody know one more time before we let Bo mention how they get a hold of us, that the Motor City Mad Mouse show is being broadcast around the world. The audio version of the Motor City Mad Mouse show can be heard on iHeartRadio, Apple, Spotify, Google, wherever you get your podcast. Please hit the red subscribe button on YouTube, South Florida Tribune. We're striving for 1,000 subscribers and more. Okay, we got our 1,000, but we're always looking to add more. Please also comment, like, and share the broadcast. Want to be a guest? Participate in the chat room. That's one way to do it. Or send your top guy to South Florida Tribune at gmail.com. You want to advertise cost efficiently? Feel free to give me a call at 954-304-4941. We broadcast live on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube. Our website, www.southfloridatribune.com, Twitter /X @Tribune South. Candy Evelyn is behind the scenes and producing the show. And as I mentioned at the top of the show, okay, I have a book out there called Lessons from the Microphone, Tuning into the Enduring Wisdom of Visionary Leaders. It's pretty much old school media versus new school media, and it is available on Kindle and Amazon, and they can get it to you right away. So with that said, Bo, let everybody know how they can get a hold of you.
Yeah, so for me, obviously you can see me with you on Tuesday nights, but you can find me on my channel at Football-Talk on YouTube. You can see me on Roku TV 5 days a week, and of course on all the socials at Football Talk with Bo.
Very good. Well, Bo, once again, thank you very much for joining us. And now everybody will know my right-hand man from Inside the Pigskin, up close and personal. And Bo, you've been a pleasure to work with from the beginning. And now people will know just a little bit more about who they're talking with on our show as well. So thank you very much for joining us on this edition of the Motor City Mad Mouse Show. We'll have another episode of the Motor City Mad Mouse Show, so stay tuned. So on behalf of Bo Crouch, my name is Scott Morgan-Roth, the Motor City Mad Mouse. Thank you for joining us. At the top of the hour, we have the Sports Exchange that will follow us. Good night, everybody, and we'll catch you the next time. See you Tuesday, Bo.
You know it.